I never made it secret that I'm not excellent at video games, but apparently a lot of you guys are annoyed that I brought it up all the freaking time. Well, I can't help but to do it, knowing that people expect some skills out of someone who makes videos about video games and also wants to develop video games. I do have skills, just not really great ones. In Cuphead, for example, I managed to get halfway through the third world after 15 hours and 400 plus deaths. Meanwhile, Darkside Phil beat the entire game on a fucking live stream. Shout your boos and throw your tomatoes, $1 each throw because fuck you. But hey, no matter how garbage I am at Cuphead, apparently a lot more garbage than Darkside Phil, at least I never asked the game devs to have the option to just skip boss fights entirely.
Now Ubi's open the door. Can we have our skip boss fight button?
Sometimes I should be more careful with my jokes. While I'm reading this stripe, I will provide you with some garbage Cuphead gameplay from yours truly.
Ubisoft made a fascinating announcement this week. They revealed that the latest Assassin's Creed is to add a Discovery Tour mode, removing all the combat and challenges from the game, to let players just freely experience their in-depth recreation of ancient Egypt.
One thing to note to this mode is that, as far as I know, you don't actually progress the game. This mode is just for you to immerse yourself within the world of Assassin's Creed Origins. I'm actually not angry after I realized that. You still need to do some stabbing to proceed through the game. However, I'm a little bit more pissed in that the presence of this mode has triggered some form of a slippery slope so that incompetent game journalists can go, hey, can we just skip boss fights? Can we then skip combat? How about we skip game? How about we just stop living at all?
It's fascinating to me because it's a big deal, and goodness me, it shouldn't be a big deal because games should be delighted to include modes that remove all their difficulty and challenge, and players should cheer when they hear about it.
It's one thing to be happy about an alternative experience for the game, it's another thing to tell people how they should react to it.
Oddly enough, a lot of players don't cheer. In fact, people can get awfully angry about it.
Okay, for the record, my 13-year-old brother is a huge fan of the Assassin's Creed games ever since the Ezio trilogy. He has played almost all of the games. I once told him that this mode will exist, and he is also furious knowing the fact that now absolute filthy casuals are going to enter the scene. And yes, I am going to call them filthy casuals, because the good casuals at least have the decency to learn how to play the freaking game. And Assassin's Creed is among the most casual of the most casual AAA games. Every installment of the series is dumbing down more and more elements to the point where 9-year-olds can play them even after the second game. To suggest that Assassin's Creed needs to get even easier is basically suggesting that water should be tasteless.
Since the announcement, I've seen on Twitter and a combination of people declaring, "Hooray! I'm interested in playing Assassin's Creed for the first time in years," alongside others pointing towards those utterly furious that it demeans their hobby, cheapens games, and most heinous of all, lets the riffraff. I say, bring on the riffraff!
I don't really know what you're talking about, but if there's legit one person on Twitter who is excited on the fact that Origins is going to be their first Assassin's Creed game thanks to a no combat mode, this person is either an infant or suffering from serious lobotomy thanks to liberal arts degrees. Nobody in the right fucking mind would look at a game called Assassin's Creed that has zero combat and go, wow, this game is going to be fun. And this is assuming that Discovery Mode progresses the game, which it doesn't. I'm 100% sure that this game would never ever let you progress anything if you haven't stabbed at least one person yet. If it did, then the next thing in my to-do list is to burn Ubisoft to the ground. Or at least just spam their forums.
I'm not playing dumb here. I'm not being coy. I know an awful lot of what's made gaming culture such a miserably toxic environment over the last few years is deeply wrapped up in subjects like this, and those who spread the toxicity are those most likely to be on the side of condemning gaming options that remove challenge, that make the hobby more accessible to the crowds.
Call me the next reincarnation of Hitler, but if I have to sacrifice competence in favor of accessibility, I will be the first person to tell filthy casuals like you to go fuck yourself. I don't care if you call me toxic. I don't care if you call me racist. I don't care if you call me a Nazi. You get into the gaming community writing articles asking game developers to remove fucking combat and you expect gamers to just be nice and kind about it? Oh man, in that case, I would welcome any forms of toxicity, preferably from those Russian Dota 2 players. I heard they don't tolerate Succ and go ballistic at anyone who does. And yes, I am committing the evil act of making the gaming community less accessible and less inclusive. I don't give a damn. I am making the gaming community less and less accessible to people who don't want to play games. I think those sorts of people are the kinds that I would happily throw a middle finger at them by the time they ask video games to have zero fucking combat. Oh, sorry, is my attitude too toxic for you? Good. Next step is to ask Valve to delete your Steam account. Everybody in your peers do it, so why don't you?
But at the same time, I'm not gonna allow that sewage to pollute my opinions and my delight in expressing those opinions. And I've long been arguing that gaming can be a far better place if the industry would only introduce the skip boss fight button.
This person is writing for a gaming outlet and he refuses to play video games so much he would ask people to have a skip boss fight button. Oh, but that's not all.
This is ground I've covered before, and each time there's been a very similar reaction. In 2009, I suggested it was daft that I'm not able to just skip ahead while playing game, like I could in a film, book, or TV show. Of course that's daft.
Why don't you go home and fuck your mother some more?
I wrote back in 2012 about the idea of being able to skip fights as a reaction to the despicable response to BioWare's Jennifer Hepler suggesting that game combat should be skippable. Of course it should!
This person... This person has got to be trolling. I refuse to believe that such a person exists and actually spout all of these words in a freaking video game outlet and mean it. And I don't know about you, but the way you worded the last paragraph, it sounded like you're trying to defend Jennifer Hepler so much to the point where you would just abandon logic and competence. How beta do you have to be that you would defend a woman for suggesting something that is so monstrously wrong?
And in light of this seismic that shouldn't be announcement regarding Ascreed Unity, I want to
Whoa. Stop right there for a moment. Stop right there. Did I hear that right? Ascreed Unity. So not only we have a condescending twat, we also have a fucking dumbass.
The reaction against these thoughts is one of us and them, and a desire to keep the them from getting near the us. Them are all ordinary, inexpert, mediocre, or worst of all, new, while us are expert, experienced, hardcore elite. But let us reject that silliness immediately and embrace the idea that welcoming the outsider in is always how society bronzes and blooms. Never mind that there are plenty of people already here who are looking for different and more varied experiences.
Okay, there are so many things wrong here. First off, I don't want the gaming community to grow because we are already in millions. The only way for it to grow is if outsiders are genuinely interested in the hobby, and you can't do that by making those hobbies to be so streamlined so much to the point where an orange juice now tastes like mineral water. Water is universally appealing, but certain flavors of juice are not. So why do we need to pour water into that juice? It will only make it a horrendous juice. Second, you are conflating two different players here. There's a difference between mediocre players like me and players who just want to skip combat mode entirely. That's not mediocre, that's drinking a glass of water by throwing it into the ground and shout, "I can drink however I want."
Gaming has always been inclusive. The idea that there was this golden age...
No, they're not. No, they're not. Gaming has never been 100% inclusive. At least it has never been inclusive to people who don't play games at all. If you're not interested in video games and you don't have the willingness to play, then don't come into the gaming industry and tell people that video games should change to the point where games don't have freaking gameplay.
And despite the outright terror that articles like this are harming their precious gaming, that the outsiders are changing games to what the self-identifying us perceive as worse, we're currently experiencing a heyday for super high difficulty, super challenging, extremely tough games like we never have before. Funny that.
And you know what? That's great. That means more and more money are going to games that are actually challenging and actually have gameplay, while the walking simulators stay in their shelves gathering dust. Funny that.
I've long hated boss fights as chronicled perennially on these pages because their difficulty spikes is game design. There's something that should be rooted out by beta testing somehow being given feature status, and yes, for some reason people love them so, but just as many, if not more, can't stand them. And when your game is made out of boss fights tied together with string, then yes, it's plainly idiotic for a hater to buy it.
Then don't buy it. Simple. There's your solution. Go spend your money in casual games. Just leave games that have actual combat alone. But I do find your perspective of boss fights interesting. I don't see them as huge difficulty spikes. I see boss fights like some form of an exam for how good you've been doing throughout the game. A lot of boss fights have different maneuvers and tactics that are different than your original enemies, which adds more and more variety into the game. It seems like the reason why you hate boss fights so much is because they are hard. No shit, Sherlock!
Here's the magic though. If games had a button that lets you skip past these incongruous segments so you could carry on enjoying the great game on the other side, that button could just as easily not be pressed.
How is skipping a boss fight make a game great?
The argument against the skip button, the tourist mode, the skippable combat, the fast forward a level, all these ideas that keep coming up is always the same. It's always, but someone might press them. It's not an enormously strong argument, all things considered.
What? Who made the argument that it's horrendous if someone might press these skip buttons? Of course they will. Why would they exist if nobody wants to do that? You're tackling ridiculously dumb arguments to strengthen your position, as in, you're just jerking off to yourself. Next page.
Because the real nub of it is, it's about exclusivity. It's about keeping the Dems, the riffraff, the outsider out. This section of the game, this is special to me, and only those as great as I am. I deserve this bit of the game. Those weaklings do not. Gosh, it's an ugly way of thinking, isn't it?
No. No, it's not. All things considered, no, it's not. You're asking combat games to have no combat. We're asking you to go fuck yourself.
And so utterly idiotic too, because it requires the mental gymnastic of somehow believing that one's own isolated experience of a game is cheapened, lessened, impacted in any conceivable way by the isolated experience of someone else playing that game. It is the transference of one's ego onto the game itself. It's not a healthy way to go about experiencing life.
Is this article for real?
The better argument, although it's a lot less frequently uttered, is, but I might press the button, and here things get a lot...
Stop. This dude is just practically giving up at this moment. Who made these horrendous arguments? I don't care about you jerking off about how awesome you are for tackling arguments that nobody made. Let's skip to the next one.
Then if that weren't enough, and it is, there can be reward mechanisms. Skip the boss and you'll not get the sparkly new sword that, ironically, will make things a little easier, but don't think about it.
Oh, yes, we should. You kind of missed the part where that sword is a reward for people after working their hard ass off to defeat the boss. You forget the part that certain games get progressively harder and harder, which means that getting that gear is important in order for you to deal with harder enemies later on in the game. But oh well, those aren't too important or anything.
So hooray for Ubisoft! Hooray for taking all the challenge and difficulty from a game for people who prefers games without challenges and difficulty! Hooray for skipping the boring bits to enjoy more of the fun! Hooray for people being allowed to enjoy a game in a different way from you! Hooray for the riffraff!
And hooray for Ubisoft to make it an optional mode that does not progress the game at all. In short, this article is written by a condescending twat, and good god, the amount of asshole this person shoves in every word is enough to make anyone go berserk. This article is basically asking for features so that people who don't want to play video games can play video games. Absolutely none of these people know what the word play means. You know that video games require you to play them, right? I can't believe that we're having this discussion in 2017. You play video games. You watch movies. You listen to music. If you tell us not to do those things, like I said, it's like drinking a glass of water by throwing it into the ground. Games require you to understand the mechanics, how the world and the characters interact with you, understanding the levels and how to get through it, understanding the challenges and enemy patterns and difficulties, and of course, you test all of those competency through boss fights like an exam. If you want to change these aspects of the game out of a misguided moral conquest to make the gaming community more inclusive, I suggest you to leave, because you're not making video games to be what they are. You're making video games to be what you want them to be. And sad to say this, and especially with that attitude you have, gamers are already throwing their middle fingers at you, and we will continue to do so the more and more you ask for this shit and continue the goddamn slippery slope. Before we end this video, huge thanks to Dust902 for the pledge on Patreon. You are fantastic. That's all for the video today. If you like this, you can go ahead, click the like button, and subscribe for more. If you wish, you can support me on Patreon. And thanks for watching.